Cliff has worked for the Home Group, which is a housing association, for over 15 years now. But in the last 2 has had responsibility for as risk manager for the engagement and the embedding of risk, both the software and also the kind of the idea of risk strategy within the business. So he's going to be talking about his experiences of that, sharing some of the highs and lows, I guess, and looking at the challenges that all risk practitioners face, I guess, regardless of the kind of the sector there that you guys are in. Some of you will be from housing associations, some of you from local authorities, charities, etc. But I guess I think all of you will recognise some parallels in your own businesses with what Cliff is going to say. It was indicated he's quite happy to take questions as they arise through out this morning's presentation. So if you can put those questions into the chat, then I'll ask them on your behalf, or alternatively, we can cover those off at the end of the session. We are recording this, so if you happen to have your screen on, you may be seen, so make sure your screen's off. If you don't want to be seen, you can refer to this, as I said, at some point in the future. Felicity will make the recording available to you all to review. Yeah, I think that's probably it. Cliff, you're on mute at the moment, because I have muted everyone, so just to make you aware of that fact. And I'll leave you to introduce yourself and carry on with this morning's session. Okay.
Lovely, thanks, Phil. And hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I think there's some familiar names on the list and some new people, so happy to meet you. Hopefully, you can all see my slides now. I've only got a few slides. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint this morning, but Phil and Felicity just asked me to talk through kind of 3 points really. So my journey into risk management, how I got here, how I've kind of fared while I've been here, and kind of just thoughts on that generally in terms of whether it's similar to your route or different. We'll find out. Risk maturity is the next one to talk about. So thinking about how our organisations are managing risk, whether or not they're doing it effectively, proactively, and how we can measure that. And then finally talking a little bit about risk management in social housing, where we are now, what the future might hold. So as Phil said, if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat and we'll kind of pick them up as we go. But I'll try to move through the slides now. So the first one is around my journey. So just 7 points really here to talk about in terms of how I got into Home Group. So I've been at Home Group 17 years. I've been risk manager for about 18 months. So it's still feels new. I think it always kind of feels new, but yeah. So I guess the first point on that is that it's been unintentional. So the fact that I'm a risk manager now is not by design at all. It's not been intentional. I've not really been that cognizant of risk throughout my life, I don't think. It's not something I've really paid much heed to. I ride a motorbike and I cut my own hair. So on paper, I'm kind of the worst candidate for a risk manager that you could possibly imagine. But from conversations I've had with peers over the last few years in the sector and outside of the sector, I think this is quite typical of our industry. We do have a lot of people who find themselves in risk management and don't necessarily aim to be there. And I think there's maybe some clues throughout my journey as to how I ended up here and what kind of makes it a good fit for me. So the first one to talk about is academia. So I'm not academic in any way, never have been. You can ask my IRM tutors. It took me multiple attempts to get through that one. And going all the way back to school, I think I struggled with academia. However, kind of being in a constant state of almost semi-confusion does come with its advantages, because it forces you to develop those qualities which enable you to access more information and to get a better understanding of the situation than maybe other people grasp straight away. So things like curiosity, humility, intuition, pragmatism, and reliability. That these are all byproducts, if you like, of being slightly slightly behind the curve in terms of academia. So speaking of school, when I left school, I went straight into an apprenticeship in mechanical engineering. This wasn't something that I was kind of massively enthusiastic about, but the thought of £80 a week when you first come out of school was just, I've never felt richer in my life. So that was kind of what tempted me across there. I wasn't naturally gifted at mechanical engineering. I didn't feel kind of in the right place working in that environment. But it did give me, again, lots of kind of benefits. Mainly, it was the opportunity to witness ingenuity, so to see people overcome obstacles and kind of apply methodology to get things done, to appreciate process, to understand how everything is sequential and investment up front can pay off dividends further down the line, and then also just to study human nature. I mean, all of life is in a factory between the kind of shop floor and the back offices. You get to see all kinds of conflict and camaraderie and all that kind of stuff. So it was a real kind of good apprenticeship in life, I think, to kind of see me through. Another thing that was quite impactful at that point, which I think has been constant throughout my career, was that I was kind of at the end of the career that there wasn't a position for me, which is a nice way of saying you kind of sacked at the end of the apprenticeship. Sorry, not the end of my career. At the end of the apprenticeship, the end of the 4 years, there wasn't a position, so I actually went kind of had a period of time out of work, and that's really influenced my work ethic now and my sense of job security. I always feel like I have to kind of go above and beyond and really kind of create a niche for myself, which again I think has led me down to that path of risk management, which can be quite a niche specialism. So not taking offense, so this isn't about what it sounds like. When I left mechanical engineering, I took a complete different direction. I had a brief kind of foray into foster care, which led me into working with young offenders. So as you can imagine, this was an unpredictable, volatile, disruptive group of people, but also some of the best and most amazing people that I've ever met, really, in my career. The idea at the time was to reduce what they called recidivism, so repeat offending. But really what it was all about was managing the risks that group of people posed to society, and also the risk that they posed to themselves through their own behaviour. So recognising that, in terms of justice, prevention's better than cure, obviously. I kind of gravitated more towards the preventative side of things, and tried to start addressing what the causes of offending were in the northeast of England, at least. I'm not sure what it's like the rest of the world, but deprivation is kind of the main driver to offending, which led me into a career at Home Group. So Home Group, as you'll be aware, is a large housing association, but we also do a lot of work with vulnerable customers, both in housing and kind of within the community as well. So the first 6 years of my career with Home Group was supporting various different groups of vulnerable clients, vulnerable customers, understanding what it is that the kind of puts them at risk, what risks they face as kind of young people, homeless, substance misuse, mental health, learning disabilities. And what I experienced, or what I noticed, is that the risks shifted from those posed by the people I was working with to those faced by the people that I was working with, and vulnerabilities became much more kind of a thing on my mind. And this just led to kind of dissatisfaction, I guess, with the kind of inequality in society, and gave me an appetite to change and to drive the kind of the large scale stuff, as opposed to just at an individual level, try to get involved in some large scale stuff that would really make a difference to many people's lives. So I kind of gradually moved towards the change world and got involved in some projects within Home Group. And again, it just became obvious that within that world, the initiatives were kind of a deviation from what they call the happy path. So the plan, really, what they envisage happening. Those initiatives that managed the deviations from that plan well, transparently and kind of dynamically, they were the ones that really succeeded. So again, without knowing it, I was being exposed to kind of project risk management at that time, and it was obvious that that was a really important part of that role. So then start to see the light, start to kind of realize that risk management was more than I'd thought in the past. So I took a role in asset management, which allowed me to use risk as a catalyst for change, really. So I think prior to that, it always seemed like risk was a bit of an obstacle to change. It was these are the bad things that might happen, when in reality, it's more about kind of enabling change and identifying the need for change. So kind of having in-depth conversations at a senior level about what we wanted to do as a business, as a department, what could prevent or enable that, and what we should really be doing about it is kind of what clicked for me. It started to make sense, I guess, at that point, the kind of different experiences I'd had and how that kind of led to risk, and I then kind of really took the plunge and became enterprise risk manager for home group. So moving on from kind of just managing those risks with an asset to thinking about the whole organization. So it's always kind of been a case of taking a step back and taking the wider view, and then seeing how these different methodologies and these different skills and qualities that I kind of picked up over the years could impact kind of broader audiences.
Sorry, Cliff, got a question.
Yeah.
The role that you took on as enterprise risk manager, was that a role that was created for you based upon the skills that you'd identified and acquired, or was that something you put forward that you felt the organisation needed, and you kind of stepped up to that role because you saw it being required?
Yeah, I'll be perfectly honest, and again, this is the serendipitous nature of my journey, is that it was just purely by chance. So we didn't previously have a dedicated role in risk management at home group. We hadn't had that for a few years. It had been kind of managed within the compliance team, and there was obviously conversations in the background ongoing about that needed to be changed, that there needed to be a risk manager, and at the same time my role in asset was becoming redundant, or was a secondment in asset actually, and my substantive role in strategy was becoming redundant, and I just happened to be on a train at the same time as the person who was recruiting for the risk manager role. We noticed each other's lanyards and got talking, and that kind of led to me applying for the job and thankfully getting it. So again, it was completely not by design. I can't take any credit for that, but it does just kind of prove that sometimes those opportunities come in lots of different forms and at different times.
Thanks, mate.
And that kind of leads on to the last bit there, that it's, people say it's not what you know, it's who you know, or it's not who you know, it's what you know. I think it's both. I think you have to be able to gather information using those skills that I talked about before, but also be able to have the relationships so that information is utilized and it goes somewhere, because something could make all the sense in the world, or conversely it could make no sense at all. But if you're not able to make it apparent to very important, busy people, and again, thinking back to those young offenders, I talked about them being kind of unpredictable, volatile, disruptive. Those qualities are all true within the leadership community as well at times, and we come across those characters on a daily basis. So being able to kind of present information to groups of people who need it in order to make decisions is really what it's all about. So I think building those relationships, having the information to hand, and there's a phrase that kind of resonates with me that I heard a few months ago, kind of separating the signal from the noise. So if the signal is kind of that meaningful information and the noise is irrelevant or distracting data, it's really pulling that out and being the kind of making sure that people hear that signal above all of the noise. I think that's our role as risk managers. So that's the end of that. Is there any questions on that particular point before I stop this annoying car driving around the screen?
Don't think so. Though from my perspective, it's quite, as you say, I think it's quite interesting that you've done a lot that's led you up to this particular point in your life and career. And I think, having spoken to other risk practitioners as well, I think sometimes there are people out there that have done the IRM course and have an exposure to risk early on in their careers, and others, as you say, kind of fall into it. So yeah, I think I reckon this is probably not untypical of a few people, definitely. But it's interesting.
Thank you. So risk maturity is the next thing to talk about. So building on the journey analogy, the best or the first way to figure out where it is that you're going is to understand where you are. And I think that's true of risk management as well within organizations. So I'm sure there are many ways to measure risk maturity. And JCAD actually have a really good tool that you can access by kind of looking at that little QR code there. So if you scan that, it'll take you straight to the JCAD tool, and I'm sure Felicity and Phil will be able to give you more details about that after the session if you'd like to. But the model I'm going to focus on is this one that was developed by, I think, David Hilton back in the 90s, and he defines the 4 N's of risk maturity. So naive, novice, normal or normalized, and then natural. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of them, what they kind of look like, what they sound like in reality, and see if you can kind of recognize where your organization is on that scale. So starting with naive, this company would be unaware of the need for the management of risk, have no structured approach to dealing with uncertainty. Management processes will be repetitive and reactive, with little or no attempt to learn from the past or to prepare for the future. So as you can see, you would look through these lenses typically for all of these levels. So culture, process, experience, and application are the 4 main kind of metrics of each level. So you can see the culture is kind of resistant, there are no processes, very little experience, and the application's kind of not there. Moving up to novice, you would then start to see an organization beginning to experiment with risk management, usually through kind of a small number of nominated individuals, but it would still probably have no formal structured generic process in place. They would be aware of the potential of kind of managing risk, the benefits of that, but not effectively implemented risk processes and not gaining the full benefits. So it's kind of seen as a bit of an overhead. There are ad hoc processes, maybe it's kind of lifted and shifted from other organisations potentially. Just a few kind of colleagues who are kind of fighting the good fight, and inconsistent or patchy application, just again through those kind of lack of processes and colleagues. Moving up to normal now, so we're kind of getting past the halfway point now. It's starting to look good. We've got management of risk is built into routine business practice. Generic risk processes are formalized and widespread, and the benefits are understood at throughout all the organization, although they may not be fully achieved in all cases. So you've got that expectation of a return on investment, I guess, for risk management. So if you're kind of recruiting risk managers, if you're setting aside time aside for risk management activities, you're expecting to kind of see some benefit from that. The processes are formalized and there's resources there to kind of allow their delivery. Staff are trained and adequately experienced, and there's evidence of kind of routine and consistent application. And finally, moving on to kind of natural, which is the unicorn. I think we've all heard of it, but not sure anyone's ever really seen it. This organization would be a very risk-aware culture, a proactive approach to managing risks, which allows them to make kind of or to take advantage of uncertainty. Risk information is actively used to improve business processes and gain a competitive advantage, and an integrated multi-level risk process is used to manage opportunities as well as threats. So gaining that advantage from uncertainty, not seen as an obstacle, seen as a kind of a positive thing to engage with. And the processes are good, best like industry standard, and then implemented across the piece. Staff are kind of trained and experienced. There's kind of lots of resource there as well, people resource, and then it's that second nature application. It's just kind of, we don't even have to think about it. So that's the the gradient that David Hilton laid out, in true risk manager fashion, one kind of word of caution I would give to this is that it's maybe worth viewing it less as a kind of straight line and maybe more as a circle or kind of a bit of a spectrum where a pendulum will kind of swing, because one of the inevitabilities you can imagine from that natural state after a few years is that people might become complacent. So if risk is being managed incredibly well and it's just kind of natural what we do, it's easy for people to slip into that kind of false sense of security. Good example of that is the recent kind of cyber attacks across the retail, travel and manufacturing industries. So I'm sure all of those IS teams, in Jaguar Land Rover and Harrods and across all the different airports were incredibly busy and subscribing to all the right kind of techniques and products to keep the stuff safe. But unfortunately, the kind of criminals were just one step ahead, and it might be that before that attack, you would look at that organization and say they're natural, they're doing it kind of really well, but obviously something's gone awry, and they've kind of maybe overestimated how secure their information is. So I guess my recommendation would be measure maturity regularly and impartially, regardless of whether or not you feel like you've achieved your goal. And again, that kind of little tool that JCAD have come up with is a really good way of remaining impartial and keeping it kind of objective, so that you get the right results. Are there any questions on that?
No, I don't think so. But you make a good point. I think the fact that you've identified that you have to sort of measure regularly your maturity to avoid complacency, I think is very important. Something that I don't always perhaps think about or recommend to people. But yeah, no, it's a very good point.
Perfect. Thank you. So this is kind of the last slide now. And it's talking about social housing, risk in social housing. So it's not saying that we're all at sea at the moment, but we do have kind of a lot of regulators, the regulator, social housing, Scottish Housing Regulator, who will be publishing their kind of sector risk profiles soon. We've got other companies like PwC doing big thought leadership activities around what risks we are managing and should be managing and stuff like that. So I'll leave predictions to people with that kind of broader view across the sector. But there are a couple of kind of suggestions, I guess, observations I've made over the last kind of year or so. I've built a bit of a network of 40 organisations and 60 professionals, some of whom are on the call today. And some of the observations I've made around what we should be doing are on this slide. So first of all, a bit corny, but I mentioned it earlier on, if we don't have relationships, we don't have anything. Building relationships is one of the main kind of tasks we have. We will live or die by the relationships that we have, I guess, in terms of risk management. So getting the respective leadership teams to really engage with the subject. This requires kind of intelligently, relentlessly, and courageously cultivating positive relationships with all of our stakeholders. Having the ability to get a seat around the table and keep that seat around the table is our primary role. Now, this is hard enough without the fact that the information that we are providing to that group or to that audience is incredibly important, but often very unreliable. We work in kind of uncertainty, and oftentimes we'll be wrong or we'll be overcautious or whatever it might be, and sometimes that erodes reliability. But it's having that courage to keep coming back. I think Rohan's on the call from Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and he mentioned this the other day, that you might be wrong 98% of the time, but the 2% of the time that you're right absolutely validates your seat around that table. And it's making sure that kind of the other skills that you bring almost balance out that kind of unreliability sometimes, or that risk that people are taking listening to you. So having those softer skills to make yourself kind of welcome, useful, and ultimately unignorable. The next one's seeking opportunities. So we've got the little watchtower up there. So part of the reason why our information might not get appreciated is that the leadership team, the kind of senior audience, are more motivated by success than failure, and that's right. That's how they should be. They're tasked with driving things forward, and I guess if we constantly only defend, then we'll never make any progress. So sometimes mixing into your risk register some kind of bolder items that capture people's attention and imagination, things that we can achieve through risk management as opposed to things that we're just trying to avoid, that might help them to engage with the wider subject. So I would encourage people, and again, it's a facet of the natural kind of maturity level, is that seeking opportunities as well as avoiding threats. The anchor represents remaining anchored in our objectives. So being able to directly link all of your activities, resources to the company's strategy has two benefits really, or is important for two reasons. Firstly, it gives you credibility in those discussions. So if you can always link back the risk or the threat or the opportunity to what it is we're trying to deliver as an organization, then it kind of it amplifies that message, but it also eradicates waste. So one of the best definitions of risk I've heard is uncertainty of the matter, and you've got to make sure it matters by linking it to your objectives. So I would really kind of make sure that we do that. And then as an extension of that, so bear in mind that we're trying to enable the good things to happen and not just avoid the bad things. The final point is that kind of lighthouse in the background. The reason that's there is that I believe that risk managers have a part to play in ensuring that we stay true to our purpose. Delivering against our moral and ethical origins will become increasingly difficult in a kind of world that's tilting towards the right. Regulators are addressing this through the kind of customer standards and all that kind of stuff, and the mainstream media is starting to kind of accept more voices from social media and all that kind of stuff. But this is really wider than just compliance or reputation. Let's not abandon what makes us different from the rest, those non-profits, the private lets, the kind of developers and that, and get distracted by those cold hard commercials. We need to stand up for the social values of our forebearers and be that beacon of light in an ever darkening world. So on many levels, I think we need to keep asking ourselves these last three questions. So what is it we want to do? What could prevent us or enable this? And what should we do about it? Thanks for your time.
That's brilliant, Cliff. Really, really good. Thanks ever so much for sort of taking the time to share your experiences. It's fascinating to see where you started to where you've got to now. We've already had a gentleman say that it was a good opportunity for him to reflect on his own journey, of which there were many parallels with yours. So as I said, I think this is not uncommon. Getting some valuable insight as well, which I think will be shared not just within the housing sector, but within other sectors in terms of, you were talking about measuring your maturity regularly, building those effective and meaningful relationships. It's so important. So, no, that was really, really terrific. Thanks ever so much, as I said, for taking the time to share that information with us today.